Hey guys, welcome back to Hook with Anime. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The senbon test. Kakashi was cold and distant, more uncommunicative than his genin had ever seen him before. They crowded around him, words pouring from Naruto's mouth as Sakura gazed at Sasuke and Sasuke gazed at him. Enough, he said quietly, but Kakashi-sensei, if there is something pressing that must be brought to my attention immediately, such as the release of the upcoming Icha triage, I plan to spend the next month in Training Ground 37. Inform me there, he said dispassionately. Sasuke will be there as well, but the postal service in Fire Country doesn't reach that high in the mountains. Sending love letters will be ineffectual. How are you going to eat? Where will you sleep? Sakura blustered, genuinely worried for Sasuke's health and safety. Sasuke made a growling noise in the back of his throat. I'm sure we'll get along fine, Kakashi said easily. It's astonishing that they could read their sensei so well, because Naruto and Sakura instantly translated that into, we're ninja, we can take care of ourselves. Sasuke didn't add to the conversation, but his agreement was clear. Both of you are to report to Ebisu-san for training every weekday for the next 3 weeks. He's made time in his schedule to bring your taijutsu up to par, Kakashi ordered. He dismissed the two of them, and they trudged out into the streets of Konoha. Sakura pulled out a few ryo and bought a newspaper for later, which she stuffed into a pocket of her jacket, while Naruto stopped across the road and got a box of pastries. What plans do you have, Sakura-chan? Naruto asks, stuffing the first of the generic deep-fried things into his mouth. I want to go see Ino-chan in the hospital and make sure she's okay, Sakura replied. I wonder if she'll forgive me. You're both kunoichi. This kind of stuff happens, Naruto argued. It's a shame she still made you forfeit, 'cause that last thing you did with the shuriken was pretty cool. Sakura shrugged. Yeah, I guess. Not that Sasuke-kun cared, but at least I would have won if it were a real fight. Anyways, she'll never get past the first round. How do you figure? Asked Naruto. Well, she only barely beat me, and that was because she got me to forfeit, said Sakura matter-of-factly. Neji-san will kick her ass easily. Then Sasuke-kun will kick his ass, and then, well. Her sentence trailed off, but obviously she didn't consider Naruto a possible contender for the final round. He didn't hold it against her, because he didn't either. Considering who his opponent was, it would be a miracle if he didn't lose in the first 5 minutes. Okay, but are you gonna train? He asks. Training was the essence of a ninja, the line that separated the likes of Kakashi and Guy from the so-called elite chunin, like the ones who monitored the first exam with Ibiki. Maybe, Sakura said noncommittally. I used to train with Tenten, which is why Ino didn't see that last attack, but she's still in the hospital after that fight with Temari-san. Naruto's first reaction was to offer to train with her. Already he could envision the gaps in her technique, and the way to correct them. Her elbows were too low on the blocks, her hand seals were too sloppy. Here. This is how you do it, says Naruto, the robes of the Yondaime Hokage flowing around his body. Sakura listens and corrects her posture, transforming from adequate and slightly awkward to a creature of feline grace and lethal power. Oh Naruto-kun, she sighs, reaching out and tracing his jawline with a finger, running it over the beard that he now has. Sakura-chan, he says, staring deep into her jade eyes framed by hair an ironic shade of pink. The sun is setting over the waters of the Naka River, and she has never looked more beautiful than in this moment, as she leans in and slap. Naruto rubbed his cheek, reddening under Sakura's furious expression even as her small handprint appeared on his face. What was that for? He asked reproachfully. You were giggling like Kakashi-sensei, she explained. Naruto remembered all too well the sparring sessions with their perverted sensei, bobbing and weaving around all three of them with contemptuous ease, chuckling luridly at Jiraiya's graphic descriptions of tits. Naruto shivered. Thanks. I think I might buy a tutor, Sakura mused, her anger draining away. I have the money for it, and Kakashi-sensei's always saying I could have the talent for genjutsu. Kurenai-sensei might be available, or I could look into the Kurama family. Wait, you can hire someone to teach you? Sakura looked sheepish. The practice is sort of frowned on for genin. The village assigns a jonin-sensei to genin cells, and jonin are supposed to have skill with taijutsu, genjutsu and ninjutsu. Of course, Guy-sensei can't really teach ninjutsu, and genjutsu isn't in Asuma-sensei's repertoire, so nobody follows or enforces that rule. Tenten learned fuinjutsu from a tutor. Maybe I should get a private teacher, Naruto said, almost axe. Sakura nodded absently. I need to get going, she said. Visiting hours are over in a few minutes. Still gotta get victory rubbed in my face by Ino Pig. They both laughed good-naturedly, and then Sakura walked off, whipping the newspaper out of her pocket. She read it as she went, having somehow perfected the skill of reading and walking at the same time. Such was her chakra control and stamina that sometimes she walked up walls and across ceilings without noticing, startling any civilians who might have been watching. Naruto thought that it was hilarious. He went home, munching on his dango. After a few hours spent procrastinating, Naruto walked down to the Hokage Tower with the Ryo earned from Wave Country jingling in his pockets. After the death of Gato and the liberation of an entire coastal economy, the pay and mission level was upgraded to A rank, mostly for their involvement in a fight that should have only been between Zabuza and Kakashi. Haku had the potential to be appropriated, whatever that meant, but the ice release wielder was beyond Konoha's reach, thanks to Kakashi. Naruto sometimes thought of the money as dirty, because it came at the expense of the most loyal ninja he'd ever met and a desperate man trying to liberate his country. Kakashi hadn't said as much when Naruto voiced these concerns, but his impression was that shinobi made a lot of money this way. Well, if he had the money for it, he was going to use it. Naruto wouldn't say he was hated or feared by the villagers, and certainly none of them crossed the street when they passed him. There was always revulsion. They almost never voluntarily spent time with him, and when they did it was never with children in the vicinity. The only adults with any great influence in his life were the Hokage and the instructors at the academy. Naruto never paid much attention to the latter, possibly a contributing factor to his continued mediocrity. The fact was, like it or not, you couldn't improve on your own. You needed another person to serve as teacher, sparring partner or apprentice. Even teaching others occasionally gave you insight, but only masters could gain skill by observing themselves. Naruto was familiar with the mission system's workings on the shinobi side. A bulletin board hosted the sheets of D ranks, next to a filing system for C and B ranks for chunin and genin cells. A and above needed to be assigned or approved by the Hokage himself, and S rank was only approved for the most suicidal, large-scale operations imaginable. Naruto was only tangentially aware of what clients did. In the ninja world, client was a word offered various degrees of respect. Professionals like Kakashi treated them with courtesy and did as they asked on a mission, while slightly laxer ninja occasionally told them off and were generally less polite. Either way, as the client was the one paying, they held ultimate authority over the ninja. What they could order was dictated by the classification of a mission and the amount of money paid. What Naruto didn't know was that there was a metric shit ton of paperwork to fill out in order to hire from Konoha. How old are ya, honey? Asks an elderly lady behind the desk. 13, Naruto answered. Any guardians, or are you emancipated? What? She sighed. Do y'all live with any grown-ups? Oh. No. From underneath the desk, she produced 30 sheets of paper bound by a paperclip. Naruto ogled at it, especially when she threw a pen on top of it. Ya gotta fill this out, K. The secretary said. Then just throw it in the pile and wait for someone to come get it. Morosely, Naruto took his first ever taste of the job of Hokage to a nearby table, where he sat down and looked at the first page. Name, age, citizenship and country of birth were easy. Moving down, past the relatively short list of qualifications for civilians, Naruto groaned at the box marked, ninja? He filled out his rank, loyalties, ninja registration number, reaffirmed he was from Konoha, put down his mission history, teammates and all past and present teachers, listed contact information, and signed a waiver stating that, as his employer, Konoha had the right to seriously curtail his freedom or execute him for breaking the law. It was a bit redundant, but he signed anyways. 3 pages in, Naruto looked up at some of the signs on the wall. One warned that attempting to lie to or cheat with ninja was tantamount to suicide. It sarcastically suggested seppuku as a less bloody and painful alternative. Naruto thought of Tezuna's loquacious and ultimately successful attempt to scam them. There was another that suggested tutors were best if selected from the range of Jonin and Tokubetsu Jonin. Any such mission was automatically a B rank, though the price was subject to the whims of the tutor and the client. He wrote the suggested rank of the mission as B, under which he scrawled, private instructor, as the description. Near the top of page 28, which was a copy of page 6 for a different filing system, the Hokage himself came to see him. Sarutobi Hiruzen appeared in a puff of smoke behind Naruto, who went on filling out the application. A mission, Naruto-kun? What do you need to hire ninja for? Stupid Kakashi-sensei, Naruto muttered. Stupid chunin exams, stupid Gaara, stupid paperwork. The Hokage shook with silent laughter, correctly interpreting the source of Naruto's frustration. His untidy handwriting filled most of the pages required to buy ninja services, triplicate in some cases. Konoha liked to keep a tidy record of all missions, so that future generations could look back at the mission reports and determine what had gone wrong. It was almost never used, but the logs had been of such great use in recent years that Sarutobi was disinclined to discontinue the practice, as much as he wanted to. Having the job of Hokage means you have to do a lot of this, he informed Naruto. Huh? All missions above B rank need to be approved by me, although those aren't as common as C and D ranks, Sarutobi explained. You have to do this every day? Naruto gasped. Ahead of him, the shining path from Genin to Hokage had abruptly darkened. His brain felt numb from just 10 minutes of reciting every financial transaction between him and the government, 24 D ranks and an A rank, monthly stipend, but doing this all the time? Yes, the Sandaime said, his voice brimming with ennui. Hell, Naruto grumbled, resuming the tortoise exercise. When I'm Hokage, all of this bullshit will be my assistant's job. If you say so, Sarutobi said knowingly. He waited for Naruto to finish filing the mission, then signed his own name on the pages. The 7th page was the actual mission description, which was dropped directly into a basket. Sarutobi swept the rest away, intending to deal with it later. You're hiring a Jonin or Tokubetsu Jonin, he told Naruto. In all of Konoha, there are about 80 of those. Right now, I would say 20 are on missions, and a further 15 have Genin cells. You may need to wait a bit before someone picks your mission up. Yeah, Naruto muttered. Sarutobi left, and Naruto sat there in the waiting room with a dozen other civilians for 20 minutes as shinobi came and went, handing in their assignments and taking new ones. He noticed that most of the clients had a wealthy, polished look to them. They had the airs of men and women with the money and power to afford Konoha's services. He felt dirty in comparison. Just as he was wondering if he'd be there for hours and hours before some Jonin he'd never heard of would come in and take the mission, Mitarashi Anko waltzed in. Naruto had a bad feeling that she was there for something in particular. The examiner started flitting through the B-rank missions, evidently in need of entertainment and revenue after the end of her involvement in the chunin selection exams. She grabbed Naruto's file and read it. Her jaw dropped. Alright, where's the brat offering 800 grand for a month of training? And she took Naruto to Training Ground 16, which consisted of a set of tall wooden poles pounded into the ground. They served as small platforms for practicing acrobatics and as targets, many of them peppered with shuriken and other thrown weapons from past training sessions. Anko considered the grubby boy carefully. On the one hand, this kind of money meant food for months, not to mention paying the rent on her palatial apartment and all the booze she could drink. On the other, even she had a measure of distrust for the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox. Hypocritical, maybe, considering the village's attitude towards her over much of her life. But that distrust was well earned, as was Naruto's. Where did you get this money? She asked loudly. A genin like you has no way of getting this much cash. Did Hokage-sama give it to you? Naruto waved her concern away. Nah, I got it from Kakashi-sensei. It's part of the bounty we collected on Momochi Zabuza. Anko squinted at him, remembering. Yeah, they did say the demon of the mist died a while ago, she allowed. Never thought it would be a genin team. I assume you killed him? Otherwise Kakashi would never share the bounty, stingy bastard. I didn't kill him, Naruto said truthfully. He died after fighting a bunch of guys with nothing but a kunai between his teeth. Anko looked at him. It was so strange she decided he was probably telling the truth, but she would check with Kakashi later. Right. So, Zabuza Momochi, with a bounty of 40 million ryo on his head and a legendary weapon that requires special training to wield. And your sensei only gave you 800 feet 000 ryo? He actually gave me 3 million in a bit, said Naruto, but I'm saving some. I think it was half for the village, 10 million for himself, and then we split the rest. Don't you have any more for your brand new sensei? Anko asked flirtatiously. Naruto pushed her out of his face, trying to ignore her provocative dress. So you'll do it? We'll see about that, Anko said pompously. This is a mission, but I haven't taken it yet. I won't touch your money if you aren't worthy of being my apprentice, and all of the Jonin have their own little tests to see if they've got prodigies or dunces. Question is, are you a prodigy or a dunce? She pulled out a packet of senbon and threw it at the nearest pole. Without even taking the packaging off, the metal needles tore it apart and embedded themselves in a perfect leaf symbol, identical to the one on both of their forehead protectors. There was a light tinkling noise as the remainder of the needles fell to the ground amidst the shredded plastic of the wrapping. This is the senbon test, Anko declared. It's a bit longer than the bell test or the ring test, but it's also different from both. Rather than testing teamwork or information gathering, the senbon test can only be passed by naturally talented shinobi. You have 2 days to be able to throw at least 20 senbon at once and make a leaf mark. I know that the academy doesn't teach that, and neither does Kakashi. So, you'll either have to learn how to do it yourself, or get someone to teach you. What? Naruto cried. How am I supposed to get that good with senbon in just 2 days? Anko shrugged casually. Get Hokage-sama to teach you, you're pretty close to him. Any of the Jonin could teach you, but they're all training their genin for the finals. Get someone, I don't care. Charisma, intellect, ingenuity, you gotta have this if you're going to learn from the best. It was when she called herself the best that Naruto resolved to beat the senbon test like his red-headed stepchild and make Anko teach him, because damn it, he was the best, and the best deserved to be trained by the best. I'll be back the day after tomorrow, Anko-sensei, and I'll pass this test if it's the last thing I do, he promised. Naruto briefly toyed with the idea of begging lessons off of Sarutobi, but ultimately decided against it. He needed every second of the next 48 hours to bring up his skill, and the Hokage couldn't give him that much attention. Also, he didn't know that Sarutobi had any particular skill with senbon at all, though it was overwhelmingly likely. Instead, he decided on a tried-and-true method of getting what he wanted: blackmail. Normally, Naruto was loath to use incriminating photos and mementos against other people, but the pictures of Iruka wearing a pink kimono after a particularly clever prank were the beginning of a slippery slope. It just so happened that if learning how to throw multiple senbon with deadly accuracy in 2 days, there was only one man for the job. It was about 8 in the evening. Kakashi and Sasuke had already left to train for the tournament, and Sakura was probably at home reading or practicing her own taijutsu. Naruto knew who he was looking for, but it took a trip to the records office to find his home address. His target lived in an actual house, sandwiched between another house in the suburbs and a corner store that Naruto bought milk from sometimes. He entered through a back window carelessly left open, disarming a few traps along the way, and waited for the man to get home. Shiranui Genma came in a few minutes later, not drunk yet but obviously preparing to be. He dumped his flak jacket on his stairs, flipped his bandana onto the kitchen table and mussed his brown hair a bit. "Hello." Naruto shouted jovially, perhaps forgetting that surprising even a relaxed Tokubetsu Jonin isn't the sanest idea. Fortunately, he had the foresight to replace himself with a shadow clone earlier, and now the 5 senbon thrown, 2 per hand and 1 spat, only hit the fabric of the couch. "What the fuck?" Genma said eloquently. "Your name is Genma, right?" Naruto asks. His new shadow clone, created from an upstairs vantage point, appeared in place of the old one. The senbon prickled against his back uncomfortably, but not so badly as to dispel him. Genma's stance lightened somewhat as he realized who the boy in his house was. "Get the hell outta here, kid, I got places to be." "Not anymore you don't," Naruto said ominously. "Remember this?" He was holding a trio of photographs, all of them depicting Genma in one way or another. The first was him sitting on a bench next to a dark-haired woman, his arm wrapped around her neck. The second was the same, only in this one they were cleaning each other's tonsils. And the third one was the two of them in bed, Genma smoking a cigarette while the girl looked at him adoringly. The camera angle was bad for all three, but the other woman was clearly Inuzuka Hana. With a hiss, Genma darted forward and shredded each of them with his bare hands. Naruto didn't even try to stop him. "Come on, do you really think I'd forget to make copies?" he said cheerfully. Genma groaned. "Just think of what soon. What do you want?" Genma muttered. Naruto's smile grew triumphant. "Teach me how to throw senbon in 2 days, or Kiba's mom gets them." Genma abruptly rolled his eyes and turned away. "Your sensei is the psycho bitch," he said. "No wonder you're trying to blackmail me. The senbon test is almost impossible to pass. In fact," he mused, "the only team to ever pass it was Mitarashi-san's. Still, her solution was pretty clever." "Tell me," Naruto said eagerly. "Nope. You gotta figure it out yourself, like the bell test and the ring test." Naruto held up the incriminating pictures. "I'm not giving you a choice," he sang. Genma sighed. mentally canceling his plans for the next 2 days. You two bastards are perfect for each other, he said. Anko was waiting in training ground 16 2 days later, a rolled-up scroll in one hand and a stick of her favorite food in the other. Naruto marched in, trailing smoke behind him at the gate as he passed. Anko wondered how he would fail. Some begged off, other tried and messed up royally. Even Genma couldn't pass the senbon test as a genin, despite the Shiranui family's penchant for teaching their use. Bad Shunshin. Those suck, she said, but you get used to it. Now, are you ready to show me how awesome you are? I'm plenty awesome, Naruto said indignantly. Put your money where your mouth is, Anko demanded, stuffing the last of the dango in her mouth. Somewhat anticlimactically, Naruto pulled out 20 senbon and threw them at the nearest post, where they formed a perfect Konoha emblem. The stick fell out of Anko's mouth in shock. How? I told you I'd pass, Naruto crowed. Anko studied him carefully. Naruto seemed relaxed. Almost too relaxed, and his hand didn't look nearly as raw from pinpricks as it should have. Naruto had definitely spent 2 straight days practicing his throw, but without enough sleep in between. How did you get here this morning? She asked innocently. Genma teleported me here. So he had you smoking something, did he? Anko said fiendishly. Yukama is more effective when eaten than smoked, but he wouldn't know that. Genma never needed that shit. So, can I assume that if I asked you to throw the senbon again, you could make a regular ol' circle? How about a square? Hell, if you can hit a target right, I'll be impressed. Naruto was slowly turning white. He cast his mind back to the bark Genma had instructed him to smoke, which tasted awful but made his aim orders of magnitude more accurate. To a degree. His muscle memory had pretty much encoded the shape of the leaf to the exclusion of all else. He drew a few more senbon and threw, but the result could only be generously called an oval with a hump on one side near the bottom of the pole. Anko leaned back and crossed her arms, appearing extraordinarily pleased. I knew you were smart enough to figure it out, she said. Yeah, the guy who gives you the ring test says it's about speed, and Kakashi probably said something else along those lines, but they're really about information gathering and teamwork, respectively. So the senbon test is to figure out how well you can cheat. And, well, I used drugs too when I passed it. My asshole teammate Shisui used Shunshin to plant the senbon directly in the target, and my slightly less asshole teammate Sho used genjutsu. Of course, our sensei saw through us in an instant, but that's not the point. So, are you gonna help me win the chunin exams or what? Naruto asks, deciding to keep his pictures of Hana and Genma to himself. Anko handed the scroll to Naruto. Inside, a contract detailed that their training sessions would last for 30 days, starting that day, and at the end Naruto would pay Anko the amount agreed to at the beginning, 800,000 ryo. There wasn't much else, other than a disclaimer that said Naruto's potential death was in no way her fault. This doesn't say what you're going to teach me, Naruto complained. Well, if you're drugged enough you can make a cool shape with senbon, Anko joked. Seriously, if I told you that at the beginning, it would take the surprise out of it. Any decent ninja could steal this from under your nose, and then they'd sell your secrets to that ginger runt you're gonna fight. Naruto mentally conceded that this was a fair point, and signed his own name under his new sensei's. Anko took the contract back, making it vanish into a pocket of her enveloping overcoat. Then she pivoted and slammed her heel into Naruto's chest. The powerful kick launched the blonde genin backwards, tumbling until he slammed into a tree and fell on his head. Lesson 1 is taijutsu. Anko hollered, adopting a fighting stance Naruto had never seen before. He hopped to his feet, created 2 shadow clones as backup, and the first fight began. Chapter 2. The first lesson. Anko was a fierce opponent. Even against a genin with admittedly subpar taijutsu skills, she held back very little. Naruto amassed a new set of bruises on his ribs in the first 5 minutes, proving once and for all that charging in with your arms spread wide was ridiculous. Even fighting defensively, Anko's probing strikes and lightning speed were enough to knock him flat on his ass whenever she thought he was losing slack. Pretty soon his nose was bleeding profusely, his upper lip and chin stained deep red in the sunlight. Naruto knew enough about injuries to understand it would hurt in about 3 hours, but right then it was all that motivated him to keep fighting and not fall on his back and stare at the clouds. Acting like Shikamaru never solved anything. Anko was slowly increasing the pressure on her student, forcing him to contort creatively and move faster and faster to avoid both straight punches and hooks, mixing plain haymakers with twisted aerial attacks and ferocious acrobatics that would do made a guy proud. Naruto hissed and spat out a mouthful of blood, wondering if he would have the time to make shadow clones. It was apparent that either Mizuki had seriously underestimated him, or Anko was on a different level altogether. Every time he went to make hand seals, she would step up the intensity and move closer, forcing his arms apart. She caught Naruto slowly lowering his hands and raised an eyebrow. Had enough? Naruto grimaced. The purpose of the exercise was debatable, but he definitely felt sluggish. He raised his hands in defeat and sat down heavily. Water. He groaned. That was terrible, Anko said flatly. It's like you didn't pay attention to your instructors in the academy. Taijutsu is an art form, tailored to the individual but uniform to some extent. Most chunin use an advanced form of karate augmented by superhuman stamina, but others use goken like your friend with the horrible fashion sense, or substitute kenjutsu instead. You just fucking suck. Thanks, Naruto deadpanned. You want to beat someone who can use sand as a weapon and a shield? You've gotta be faster. You've gotta hit harder and be harder to hit. Anko smiled a smile that Naruto would come to fear in the weeks to come. Run laps until I get back. Naruto said something uncharitable about her ancestry under his breath and wobbled to his feet. He felt his legs wavering under him as he forced himself to start running. Where he was going, he didn't know, but Anko would find him. Anko was thorough like that. Anko decided to gather some more information on Gaara, Naruto's first opponent in the final tournament. From what she knew from monitoring the second event, he was the odds-on favorite from Suna, and his entire team should have been promoted to chunin long ago. Concurrent and Temari, his older siblings, were both experienced and powerful shinobi. Gaara, younger than both by a wide margin, was purported to be the strongest and most ruthless of the three. She knew their father was the Yondaime Kazekage, a man tasked with guiding Suna through an economic crisis. His signature ability of harnessing gold dust appeared to be handed down to his son, though in some bastardized form. Anko recalled that his predecessor used iron fillings instead. Gaara was difficult to track down, but eventually she chanced on him and his siblings together with a man she could only assume was their Jonin sensei. The veteran of Suna was fighting with Concurrent against Temari, in a battle that looked to be close to a draw. The kunoichi's nature transformation was so honed that her brother and mentor were unable to get close, and neither could the puppets Anko spotted creeping behind the blonde. Temari would flit forwards and backwards, keeping track of their positions like pawns on a chessboard. The youngest didn't join in. Gaara, whose small size and anorexic frame belied a preternatural strength and cunning, stood stoically off to the side. His mastery of the sand in his gourd was apparently so great that he didn't feel the need to train. This would have bothered Anko less if it didn't look like his teammates agreed with that stance. Now that she noticed, camouflaged against a far-off wall as she was, Gaara looked tired. The dark rings around his eyes weren't manifestations of a Kekkei Genkai or some kind of jutsu, they were just bags. Gaara was an insomniac. One fucked up kid, Anko thought, adjusting her cloak to move slightly to the right. A shuriken thumped into the section of the wall she had vacated. Almost like a Jinchuriki, actually. Kinda sad, lonely, a psychopath. But Orochimaru sensei is all of that too. Maybe he's just another Uchiha Itachi. Either way, I got my work cut out for me. If it's true. Dunno if even I could beat this guy. That was a bit of an exaggeration. If Anko were truly pressed to kill Gaara, she would use the tried and true backstab. Or maybe exploding tags. No kill like overkill, and the crazy runt who threatened casual death and followed up on it warranted the best artillery she could get her hands on. The irony of that concept made a whistling noise as it flew over her head. Anko made a beeline for the Konoha hospital, leaping across rooftops and thinking quietly. She hadn't been present for Rock Lee's fight with Gaara, but his sensei had. Guy would almost certainly be in Lee's hospital room, and cornering someone who'd seen the fight would help detail Gaara's ability to her. Also, he could potentially suggest a fighting style for Naruto. The receptionist at the hospital was a much maligned woman who had gradually become used to ninja who didn't listen to her. Instead, she volunteered Lee's location without much fuss. Unfortunately, Guy wasn't there. Lee was asleep, maybe even drugged, and nobody was there to suggest where to find someone to whip up the appropriate conversation. Nobody except. Hello, Anko-san. Anko turned around. How'd ya know I was here? She asks, fighting off a smirk. Guy was good, but Kurenai Yuhi was better. At least she didn't speak in an obscure dialect of gibberish. I was visiting Hinata-san while she recovers, and she told me you were looking for Lee's room, said Kurenai. Guy isn't here, the younger woman groused. Probably off with Neji doing something youthful or whatever. Kurenai shivered. Don't say it like that, it sounds perverted, she advised. Says Kurenai-chan, Anko teased, with all those missions you have with Asuma. I hear you two are thinking of settling down. Why? Kurenai wondered how to answer the question without triggering some kind of meltdown. Anko was liable to overreact to simple things like personal slights, while serious things sometimes just slipped by her. I'm pregnant, she finally said. No, Anko howled, Kurenai-chan. You're the only active duty Jonin kunoichi. What's Suna gonna think when they see our only 2 female Jonin are on maternity leave? Just because Suna hasn't outlawed abortion doesn't mean they'll think any less of us, Kurenai said crossly. So the elite face of Konoha is currently all male, and of all the Jonin in the village 3% is now guy, Anko shot back. What do you have to say for yourself? I wish we hadn't run out of condoms. Both of them maintained serious expressions for a moment, then burst out laughing. Kurenai leaned against the wall, wiping sweat off her brow. Anko was one of her best friends, ever since their friendly rivalry over who could go from Tokubetsu Jonin to full Jonin first. She was witty, crude, perceptive, and an excellent ninja. Kurenai privately thought that she deserved the higher rank between the two of them, but as it was she only had until Anko's promotion to milk as many drinks as possible from her. Can we talk for a bit? Anko asks, sobering. Sure, what can I do for you? Tell me about Gaara. Kurenai shivered again. Where do I begin? I heard he's the Jinchuriki of Shukaku, but Kakashi-senpai was sort of vague on that. He uses that giant tub to hold sand, and he fights with the stuff rather effectively. He's not training, Anko complained. Makes sense to me, Kurenai said. He doesn't sound like he cares about anything, and that includes being a ninja. Sort of bloodthirsty, though. He crippled Rock Lee because a voice in his head told him to. The voice of Shukaku, you think? Anko reasoned. It probably wasn't actually the sand demon sealed in Gaara, just a lesser spirit of the desert. They weren't exactly known for their honesty. He called it mother, but they say that spirit's insane. It could be lying to him, or they could both be nuttier than a ration bar. So how good is he? Good enough to beat Lee, and he was his on Team Guy, said Kurenai. I'd say between Chunin and Jonin, but it's a bit difficult to say. Long range without a doubt, but he took some serious hits from Lee without flinching. That sand is fast enough to block almost anything, and when Lee wore him down a bit it turned out he has this sand armor that shielded him completely. If he's vulnerable to taijutsu, it's better than anything the rookies can offer. Well, maybe not the Uchiha, but the rest of them are toast. His opponent is Naruto, Anko supplied. I'm gonna train him for the next month, see if he has talent or if he's full of hot air. Uzumaki Naruto? Kurenai said, surprised. He's the one that painted the Hokage's faces pink, right? His victory against Kiba was startling, to say the least. She still sounded raw over it. Jonin rarely liked to admit that genin they submitted to the Chunin exams weren't ready, and in Kurenai's case they really were. It seemed Naruto had won by a fluke of bodily processes. He farted? Anko exclaimed. This kid is full of hidden depths or some shit. Kind of reminds me of my own Chunin promotion. Flashing your boobs at show isn't quite the same thing, Kurenai said wryly. You did it to Guy in the next round, Anko pointed out. Bet he still dreams about it. And Naruto, feeling like his insides were turning to warm mush, was still running 2.5 hours later when Anko came back. She had a leather shopping bag looped over one arm. As soon as he saw her, Naruto flopped onto his back and closed his eyes. Oi! She shouted, dropping the bag at her feet. It made a suspiciously loud noise hitting the ground, and when Naruto cracked an eyelid open he found that the ground was broken into shards around the point of impact. What is that? He asked in a harsh whisper, lamenting his sore throat and burning muscles. 2,000 extra ryo out of your wallet, Anko answered. Any and all supplies I deem necessary for your training will be purchased by you. It's part of the contract. I hate you. They were weights. Naruto was familiar with the concept of training with weights, especially for running and calisthenics. They were only used to vary workouts and make easy exercises difficult for more physically advanced ninja. Shino and Ino, both taller and stronger than most of their classmates, wore them more frequently. By now you might have noticed that ninja like Rock Lee can punch and kick much harder than they logically should be able to, Anko said, and with good reason. Their training regimes are tailored to include weights, as if they were suddenly hundreds of pounds heavier than they normally are. That way, When the weights are removed, their strength appears to skyrocket. Most ninja don't wear their weights all day every day, just for training. This is a hybrid option. We're training you up to the point that you can dodge Gaara's sand, but obviously we can't make you Lee's equal in just a month without some form of steroids. So, medium weights during the day, and you'll take them off at night. How do you know? I got Hayate to show me the tape. Naruto grudgingly put the leg weights on. They were made of long rectangular bars of unidentifiable metal, belted into a cylinder that cinched tightly around his shins. Anko pulled him to his feet, and he was surprised at how much heavier he felt now that moving his feet was noticeably difficult. You'll get over it in a few minutes, Anko advised. But before we do that, let's talk about your chakra. What about it? Naruto asked, testing the new weight of his legs. It was harder to move, but not so much that he would move less than he normally did. The pink-haired one with the book told me that you didn't know what it was when you graduated. Clearly you are some kind of idiot savant, emphasis on idiot. Chakra is what we'll be focusing on now, because this is your one and only advantage over Gaara. I spent the time looking for Gaara to see what kind of training he does. He doesn't train. What? Naruto exclaimed. How did he get so good if he doesn't train harder than everyone else? Training harder than everyone else won't necessarily make you the best, Anko said. Lee trains harder than you ever will, but is he gonna be Hokage? No, and if he can't even use ninjutsu, he'll only ever make it to Tokubetsu Jonin. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Gaara is already what he perceives as the best. Either that or he's insane and doesn't care, which is a possibility. Not that it makes a difference, because obviously he's better than Lee. What does that have to do with chakra? Naruto asks. Taijutsu is out, Anko said forlornly. You need to train it up anyways or Gaara will crush you like he crushed Bushy Brows, but you need something else to win. What that something else is, and whether it will give you a chance in hell of beating that monster, will depend on how much chakra you have. So you want to know how much chakra I have, Naruto finished. Good thing I didn't use any on that run. How much do you have? Anko asks, honestly curious. In response, Naruto closed his eyes and forced his chakra system to work faster. His skin started to glow blue, the mystical energy leaking out of his skin and into the air. Anko politely shuffled backwards, and Naruto pushed all of his remaining energy out. Anko stood up, coughing. Whatever Naruto had just done, there was very little remaining of Training Ground 16. The wooden beams had been blasted down by the facsimile of an explosion generated by a determined Naruto. She was fairly certain that the one time her sensei had exuded pure chakra it was more intense and also less explosive, but Naruto seemed dead set on bucking her understanding of him. Chakra that behaved differently from the norm was the hallmark of a Jinchuriki, wasn't it? Red and corrosive. Demonic. But Naruto hadn't used any of the demonic chakra to cause that explosion. It was all blue, all Naruto. Naruto, who apparently had more chakra than the Hokage himself, even without the Kyuubi adding to the mix. That was impossible, or Anko hadn't thought it would be possible. It was, frankly, more unlikely than finding a diamond lying on the side of the road. Yet here he was, impossibility and all. Naruto himself was comatose on the ground all the way across the training field. He was thankfully uninjured, but without any chakra their training session was brought to a crashing halt. Anko dragged herself over and hefted his body on her shoulder. It was her job as a sensei to take him to the hospital, from which she just came, and after that it was her obligation to go out and start preemptively spending some of her paycheck. Kakashi observed Sasuke fighting his shadow clones. Part of it was the difficulty involved in effectively fighting as 5 people at once, but already Sasuke was noticeably better. In a few days he would be more than a match for legions of shadow clones, and then he would be ready to learn the Chidori. It was a tough choice to part with his masterwork technique, but Kakashi ultimately put his trust in the hands of his teammates. Uchiha Sasuke needed to be promoted to chunin in the tournament, at which point he would no longer be Kakashi's problem. Then, he could focus his energies on bringing Naruto and Sakura up to par. There was a slim chance that Naruto would be selected as well, which would be good for Sakura but less so for him. He needed more guidance. Relying on farts to win fights wouldn't fly in an ambush or a war zone. More so, Naruto was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. There were more than a handful of Jinchuriki spattered across the pages of history, and each of them succumbed to the demon they held. Naruto needed to be special, or the 9-tailed fox would devour his soul. Sasuke moved quickly, managing to dispel one of his clones before being backhanded across the field. He's impressive, for a genin. Kakashi's eyes grew impossibly wide and began to sparkle. Jiraiya-sama, he said reverently. Jiraiya looked nonplussed at the treatment. Ah, Kakashi-kun, right? I could never keep those kids of Minato straight. You aren't Rin, and I think Obito was a Hyuga or something. Ma, I am Hitaki Kakashi. Kakashi kept his thoughts on the fictional, Hyuga Obito, to himself. Right, Kakashi, Jiraiya said placatingly. Listen, much as I'd like to stay and chat, I need to know where Naruto-kun is. He's being trained by Ebisu-san for the next month, Kakashi replied. I called in some favors from Asama's brother, and he agreed to hold off on training Konohamaru-kun until the tournament rolls around. Ebisu? Jiraiya asked incredulously. Why aren't you training him yourself? The sparkling expression melted off Kakashi's face. Because I can only train one of them effectively in time to stand a chance against the rest of the competitors. Sasuke is my best student by a wide margin, and with my training he should be promoted to chunin without too much trouble. Then I can focus on training Naruto and Sakura. But Ebisu is a Tokubetsu Jonin and certified instructor, Kakashi said firmly. Naruto will attend the chunin selections, and he will win or lose on his own merits. I am doing him a favor with this, he isn't ready. Jiraiya sighed. Fine. I take it I can offer my own training? Of course, Jiraiya-sama. Kakashi enthused, the sparkling eyes returning. Just remember who he is and what his limits are. That's the problem with the Uzumaki, Jiraiya thought, walking down the mountain from training ground 37. Nobody could ever tell what their limits were until it was too late. The next day, Naruto woke up in the hospital and immediately discharged himself. It wasn't the most legal action available, but his chakra recovered so much faster than Kakashi's that he was ready to begin training again, albeit lightly. Training ground 16 had bemulched, like a titanic hammer had dropped in the middle and cracked the earth in every direction. Naruto figured the hospital officials would be less likely to find him in such an unusable location. Anko was nowhere to be found, so he began the speed exercises that she described. 60 straight punches, 20 crescent kicks, 10 push-ups, repeat. His muscles started to loosen, and Naruto slowly increased the pace of the exercise. Eventually he dropped the push-ups altogether and began working on kata. In every ninja's mind, their invisible training partners are always stronger, faster and smarter than they are. But today Naruto's imaginary foes seemed a little slower and duller than usual. Maybe he was improving. He was just starting the 7th form, which demanded speed and rigorous attention to detail, when voices rose over the din of his clothing rustling. Quickly and without thinking, he dashed across the grounds to a nearby copse and used his oldest and most reliable technique, the Kokoramino no Jutsu. Whoa! What happened here? Said a familiar voice. It looks like those pictures of Tsunade-sama's battlegrounds, said another, enthralled. Don't get your hopes up, she's not in Konoha. None of the Sannin well, I heard Jiraiya-sama is in town, but that was just gossip. Yeah, gossip spread by women. Trust me, if anyone knows for certain whether the pervert is in Konoha, it'll be the women. The first speaker was Sakura, followed by the girl who lost to Tamari in the first round. Tenten looked as hale as she had before the match, which ended with her fracturing 3 ribs on a metal pole after falling 2 meters. She was probably used to the pain, which might explain why she and Sakura were out and wandering Konoha. Think we can use it? Sakura wondered, stepping lightly on the fractured terrain. She looked about warily, as if Tsunade or someone of equal strength might frown on being interrupted. Relax. Tenten chided, joining her. It'll be good training, for when we have to fight in some place that's been blown up or destroyed somehow. A blond man with a horizontal scratch through his Iwa Hite 8 sneezed. Good idea, said Sakura. This might be good practice for the next chunin exams. They both looked pensive for a moment. Either of them might have been ready for such a promotion, but Tenten's opponent had been orders of magnitude more skilled. Ino had already lost by the time Sakura threw that last shuriken, but her clan's jutsu gave her the edge necessary to beat her one-time friend. Most people considered her the lowest point of the coming tournament, and some speculated she would surrender immediately when it came time to fight Neji. Got anything else to show me? Asked Sakura. In response, Tenten drew a sword with a 160-centimeter long blade and a clawed hilt. It wasn't as detailed as her favorite weapon, a katana with aluminum-plated fullers and a red tassel on the ivory pommel, but it was almost as long as she was tall. Wow. Yeah, it's brand new, Tenten said proudly. Imported directly from the land of iron, meant for a samurai at least 6 feet tall. The merchant guy didn't believe me when I said it was mine until I picked it up. In response, Sakura drew a laughably small metal rod and charged at her sparring partner. Tenten leveraged the oversized sword into a diagonal sweep, which Sakura blocked using the rod. At such close range the sword was useless, so Tenten planted it on the ground and threw her body weight into a kick to Sakura's pelvis. Sakura stumbled back a few steps, allowing Tenten to swipe the odachi at her again. The short length of available pipe engaged both of Sakura's hands in deflecting, so Sakura pushed forward and tried to throw Tenten's arms off before smashing it into her stomach. Unfortunately for her, Tenten was much stronger, and instead absorbed the push and kicked for Sakura's head. The pink-haired girl dropped to her knees and gave Tenten a solid whack on the shins, buckling her. Of course, the other girl's talent was impossible to ignore. Annoyed now, Tenten's left hand vanished into her blouse, returning with a scroll. It rolled out behind Sakura and glowed blue before disappearing. The ground changed subtly. Tenten heaved forward, surprising Sakura. Naruto's teammate fell backwards into a puddle of tar, drenching her in sticky liquid and binding her to the ground. Tara Hitsugi no Jutsu, Tenten proclaimed, sneering down at Sakura. Fuinjutsu is useful for storing weapons and such, but what about making traps? I made this one a few days ago. What do you think, huh? Sakura stood up, still knee-deep in the thick tar. She spat some of the sticky liquid back into the pit, then smiled. Megan. Kokoni Arazu no Jutsu. Tenten adopted an odd expression. She dropped the sword and marched heedlessly into the tar pit. Gotcha. Sakura shouted triumphantly, trying and failing to look successful while covered in tar. Tenten shook the genjutsu off and snarled, lunging forward and tackling Sakura into the tar. They rolled around for a while in the black liquid, completely ruining their clothes while putting each other into half-formed joint locks and finishing moves. Naruto almost dropped the cloak of invisibility right then, intending to find a new training ground to improve his speed, when Tenten and Sakura rolled over one final time, now visible to him through the pitch-colored layer coating both of them. They were kissing. Awkwardly, and it only lasted for a few seconds before Tenten casually attempted to dust herself off and stand up, but it was there. Naruto's mind blanked out. Almost in a dream, he turned and left, carelessly abandoning his disguise behind him as he walked dazedly away. His walk quickly turned into a jog and then into a run, out of the area and down a dirt path. His thoughts were a messy tumble of emotions and ideas, too many to express with the words in his vocabulary. In the end, he settled on going home, eating ramen, and staring up at the ceiling for the rest of the day. Chapter 3. The contract. To Anko's dismay, Naruto was nowhere to be found for the next few days. Asking around revealed that he had indeed been practicing, but wherever people directed her, he wasn't there. Anko was just beginning to think that he'd given up on her brutal training regime when he showed up at her flat one morning. He looked dead tired. Like a zombie. His ice-blue eyes appeared dull, scratched and unfocused, and his hair was shredded. Bandages wound their way around both wrists, indicating recent injuries accrued from training. Anko wasn't really sure what to make of it when he walked in past her and started making coffee at her kitchenette. "Where were you?" she demanded, throwing herself over the kitchen counter into a slide. The effect was supposed to be dramatic, but she only made it halfway into Naruto's field of vision before friction brought her to a stop. She pulled herself the rest of the way. Naruto ignored her, slowly pouring the coffee into a mug before downing all of it, still black, in one go. "I needed that," he muttered. "Ain't slept longer than, 4 hours? You can tell me why you're here or you can get the hell out," Anko said crossly. "Fuck your money, if you're not gonna show up." "Meet me in training ground 3 in 30 minutes, Naruto went on, dropping the empty cup of coffee in the sink and walking away from Anko yet again. "Okay, now what?" "I need to use your shower," Naruto called over his shoulder. "Forgot to pay my water bill, they shut mine off." The door to Anko's bathroom clicked closed, leaving the homeowner prostrate on her own counter. Sighing, Anko got up and dusted herself off. No stranger to sharing her bathroom with random people, she stuffed the coffee equipment haphazardly back into a cupboard before pulling on her boots and going out to get the newspaper and meet him at the third ground. At first glance, the third training ground was simply a substitute for the 16th, which Naruto had destroyed and someone had subsequently coated in tar. But the third training ground was actually a boon from Sarutobi Hiruzen himself. It was only available for his own use, as well as the use of his students, their students, and so on. Anko had access as a former genin under Orochimaru, and Naruto's sensei was Kakashi, whose sensei was Namikaze Minato, and his sensei was Jiraiya. Annoyed as she was by Naruto's erratic behavior and lack of punctuality, Anko decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Call it intuition, but she thought he might have had a surprise up her sleeve. And when Naruto finally lumbered into Training Ground 3, he looked refreshed. The ragged patches of missing hair had been combed over, and he no longer looked like the Walking Dead. He bowed perfunctorily as he approached and attacked. The difference between his earlier performance and this one was incredible. Where once he'd been clumsy and uncoordinated, now he was refined and accurate. His speed had been ratcheted from sloth to lightning, limbs flying as he viciously pushed his unprepared sensei to the brink of a river. She stepped onto the water and allowed him to thrust forward, intending to flip Naruto over onto his back, but Naruto was surprisingly savvy about the tactic. As soon as Anko gripped his wrist, he dropped his weight and swept one foot out from underneath her. Anko regained her balance fairly quickly and responded with a 1-2 to the face, which Naruto blocked. His stamina had increased too. While before he was panting and tired in the first minute or so, after almost half an hour he'd barely broken a sweat. Anko still had the upper hand, but it was a battle she could only win slowly. Damn, where did this come from? She thought, forearms reverberating with the effort of blocking a roundhouse kick. Naruto was subsequently beaten to the ground, but the fact remained that he had become much faster, stronger and agile. Anko crouched over his downed body, panting lightly. Mind telling me what the hell you've been doing for the last couple of days? She grunted. I said you weren't teaching fast enough, Naruto gasped. Really? You look like Guy worked you over. He did, Naruto said balefully. Anko raised an eyebrow. Guy was exuberant in dispensing training to anyone he deemed youthful, but why would anyone voluntarily search him out? Doing thousands of repetitions only worked if you already had a certain degree of fitness. Or if you were using the sort of drugs that Konoha frowned on. Anko inhaled deeply. You don't smell like steroids, Anko said pensively. What did you do? How can you smell stir whatever? Naruto cried, flinching under her penetrating gaze. Tokubetsu Jonin, Anko answered proudly. Elite chunin in all respects except for one. I'm a master tracker. My sense of smell is better than your eyesight, and the scent never lies. What drugs were you using? Finally, Naruto relented. Soldier pills, he muttered. Soldier pills? Anko acts, dumbfounded. Those don't increase your metabolism, do they? Never heard of someone using one outside of combat. Except for the guys who have those contests to see who can eat the most before passing out. The winner is usually Genma. Genma's got secrets, Naruto said playfully, standing up and dusting himself off. One of them is that soldier pills not only give you a chakra boost, they do increase your metabolism, and they also make you make chakra faster. I learned that the same way I learned about that disgusting bark stuff, and he knows 'cause he eats way too many of them. Drugging yourself isn't the answer to everything, Anko said hotly. It is if you're trying to win a competition, Naruto shouted. I got almost as good as Sasuke Teme in a week, and by the time we fight I'll be the best, believe it. Senejashu. Anko yelled. 6 snakes burst from her sleeve, stretching impossibly long and wrapping themselves around Naruto tightly. She smirked, relishing in Naruto's helplessness as he flailed within the confines of his serpentine bindings. You ready to stop mouthing off to me? She asked lazily, putting a fingertip on his forehead. Naruto smiled. Just a clone, he said, disappearing in a puff of smoke. From behind, the real Naruto took his second wind and attacked yet again. This time he employed ninjutsu, spitting shadow clones out as diversions and forcing Anko to fight with them while he hung back and conserved his energy. The soldier pills he'd eaten were still forcing his body to perform at rates faster than could be considered safe, but as long as he ate right after the fight he'd be fine. What are trying to prove? Anko whispered in his ear. Naruto blinked. She had been in front of him just minutes ago, and then she disappeared. Was this the shunshin? A technique taught to genin but virtually useless to someone without the experience of a master? For Anko to use it so casually. Serious question, she went on, bending at the waist to avoid his first punch. Are you trying to say, I'm Uzumaki Naruto and I don't need you, but you hired me to train you, so it can't be that? What about, look how awesome I am, I can make half-assed strategies and impress people? No, that can't be it either, you ain't that stupid. Probably. Naruto was slowly tiring. shedding shadow clones like snakeskin rather than firing them like shuriken, but Anko was speeding up, dispatching them efficiently with quick strokes of a kunai. Bulling his way past the flashing blade, Naruto punched Anko in the gut and received an elbow to the head for his trouble. Starburst exploded behind his eyelids, and he was out like a light. Anko looked down at Naruto and shrugged. Or maybe it was an apology, she said to herself, and, I'm sorry, or a promise. Whatever. Let's get you back to my apartment. And Jiraiya, after finally getting Naruto's home address out of an irritable desk worker, was dismayed to find the apartment empty. A brief search revealed only out-of-date cups of instant ramen, a pair of orange-tinted goggles and a photograph of Team 7 lying on an empty dresser. Even the water was shut off, which could only be bad news. The Toad Sage sat down on the bed, head resting in his hands and thinking carefully. Where would a hyperactive Jinchuriki missing half his regular squad be during the day? And worse, why was his water off? Not even demon containers were paid that badly. The guilt of abandoning his godson for a decade of his life was crushing, and Jiraiya felt even more miserable when he considered the usual burden of a Jinchuriki. He barely even knew what kind of person that pain had shaped Naruto into, and the most he could get out people without violating the taboo of the Yondaime's secret was that he played pranks. Was he a trickster, wallowing in schadenfreude as his victims suffered? Was he a casual mischief maker? Did he do it for the attention, to stave off the yawning void of loneliness, or did he have friends, the childhood that Gaara could only wish for? I wish it could be different, he said aloud. Jiraiya had many regrets over his 50 years of life, almost too many to name. Nagato, Yahiko, Konan, Kushina, Minato, Dan, Tsunade, Orochimaru and Naruto all weighed heavily on his conscience, but none so heavily as Naruto. To be fair, he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to take on a new apprentice. The great Toad Sage once said that his choice would change the destiny of the entire world, and quite frankly Jiraiya did not like those stakes. Perhaps change would be better off undone, with his only 2 apprentices dead and gone. If only Jiraiya could have never heard those words from the wrinkled Toad's mouth, he would be a happier man. Who are you and what are you, Jiraiya-sama? He glanced up. Hello, Book-chan, he teased. Why are you here? Sakura looked away, embarrassed. I found that stupid bedsheet Naruto uses to pretend to hide, she muttered, and I thought I'd bring it back. She held out a neatly folded square of cloth with a camouflage pattern printed on it. Jiraiya said nothing as she deposited the ratty thing on the small bed, noting that nothing in the apartment had been washed in a long time, themselves included. As she left, he threw some parting words at the pink-haired girl. I know it doesn't seem like it, but Kakashi-san cares about you. He cares about all of you, because that's a teacher's job. If you have any problems, he'll be happy to listen to you, no matter what. Sakura turned around slowly. How did you know? She whispered. My dear, I am the great and gallant Jiraiya, he proclaimed, jumping into a one-legged pose. I am an infamous purveyor of women. It is my duty and pleasure to be aware of it. She smiled gratefully and left, a deep burden seemingly lifted from her shoulders. Jiraiya watched her leave and briefly thought of Tsunade. Regrets weigh you down, he decided. I made the choice to live for the future. I only need to find Naruto. Anko extracted an irate Naruto from her mess of bedsheets and kicked him back into the kitchen. He howled about the unfairness of life for a bit, until she came back out later with the salami. Why do you have lunch meat in your bedroom? Asked the Jinchuriki, more than a little curious. I keep a little of everything in my bedroom, Naruto-kun, Anko said breezily. You still have much to learn in the ways of the legendary ninja, like how to fight with a hangover and how to survive being a prisoner of war for extended periods of time. Both involve keeping meat in your room. Can those lessons wait? He asked, feeling a little green. For now, Anko said generously. Your next lesson is the most important jutsu anyone will ever teach you. All jonin know a variation of this technique, and it's important that you do too. The hand seals were boar, dog, bird, monkey, ram. Anko made Naruto repeat the sequence without chakra until he was thoroughly bored. She seemed unusually intent on him mastering this omnipresent technique, so he kept his mouth shut until she was satisfied he wouldn't leave out the monkey seal and turn it into a Raiden technique by accident. Okay, that's good enough, she finally said. Now, here's what it does. Kuchiyose no jutsu. Anko slapped her right hand against the table, and a viper as long as she was tall wound its way around her arm and torso. It hissed something at her, and, disconcertingly, she hissed back. This is my favorite summon, Anko explained, rubbing the gargantuan snake's head fondly. Most ninja have one. Kakashi-san uses Pakun the most, Guy-san relies on Ningame, and Sarutobi-sama occasionally summons Enma. Is he tame, Anko-sensei? Naruto wondered. Tame? Anko laughed. Summons are only loyal to their contractors and their masters. Yutakuna here is my friend, but she'll bite you in the ass if she gets the chance. Hey. Just his luck to pick up the ninja equivalent of the crazy cat lady. Crazy snake lady was almost too mild of a description for Anko. She even looked happy with a venomous snake wrapped around her body. There are two ways we can go about giving this technique to you. Any spirit domain you sign a contract with, you can summon from. If I were to give you my snake contract, you could sign it and that would be that. Or, you can make your own contract with a different type of summon. Naruto eyed the viper warily, and quickly came to the conclusion that summoning snakes would be one more step on the path to madness and torturing poor defenseless genins soon to be chunin. I think I'll write my own, thanks, he said hastily. They busied themselves over lunch with the details of actually contracting a summon. Anko explained the various clauses and wordings, as well as the fact that any summon could summon its summoner. Each spirit animal had its own domain. Snakes had Ryuchi Cave, for example. When he performed the jutsu, he would be sent to the home of the animal that best suited him, and he could bargain for a contract with the summons. You have to watch out for a few things, Anko said, her mouth full of sandwich. Boss summons are about as powerful as true demons, and they don't always sign with less experienced summoners. When you get there, look for one of the second tier of command and write one with them. Any snake can sign on behalf of the snakes, and toad can sign on behalf of the toads, and so on. What sort of stuff are they gonna ask for? Depends. I don't know a whole lot about this, Anko admitted. My sensei was in Ryuchi Cave when I tried summoning the first time, and he helped me out with all this after he finished laughing his ass off. You're gonna be on your own. I think most of them demand a test of some kind. Naruto made a face. So I could literally be summoning anything. What if I get something lame, like slugs, or toads? Hey, Yondaime-sama summoned toads. Don't diss their looks, they can hold really big swords and vomit oil and stuff. But they're awful. Naruto cried. They're like green, and green is the worst color ever. And they have warts, and Iruka-sensei says the Yondaime got his contract from Jiraiya. Not a fan of the Sannin or their summons. Anko acts. Neither am I now. Are you gonna make those hand seals or what? Anything from a shark to a hawk could be waiting for you. Fine, Naruto grumbled. Kuchiyose no jutsu. Anko was alone in the kitchen. After some consideration, she finished Naruto's sandwich for him. Naruto found himself in a forest of oaks and a white type of tree he didn't recognize. The sky was an interesting shade of mauve, and the sun seemed to be moving around the horizon, rather than over the sky. A few minutes after making that startling realization, Naruto wandered into a copse that had been charred black. What the hell is wrong with this place? He murmured, running his fingers over the ruined bark. The trees had either been burned incompetently, or smashed and painted black. Naruto didn't see any other way it could be the only stand destroyed with so many others nearby. He was quickly proven wrong. Hours passed, and he ran into 3 other copses that had been wrecked, each tree scorched from branches to roots. Naruto kept his ears open for sounds of life, but not even birds chirped. No hunters prowled or prey fled, and he was beginning to wonder if he had stumbled into a dead realm. He crouched on the dirt, carefully scrutinizing a patch for earthworms or something. What could you do with an earthworm contract? How could an earthworm even sign a contract? This was getting ridiculous. Does anything live here? Naruto bellowed. Where are you? I'm right here. Ah. The other speaker was an orange and white lump the size of a boulder. It moved with a sloth's speed, yet somehow managed to sneak up on Naruto without any noise and subsequently scare him into a tree. The slug inspected Naruto's head, which was developing a goose egg already. Oh my, I do hope that doesn't hurt too much, it said. Naruto jerked to his feet, already preparing an escape from the incredibly mobile pile of slime. It waved its feelers in the air, trying to diffuse Naruto's fear. Wait, please, it said. Why do you come to Shikatsu Forest? What? What are you? Naruto panted, dropping his hands and relaxing when he saw there would be no fight forthcoming. I am a slug, said the slug. More to the point, I am the servant of Katsuyu-sama and I want to know why you intrude on our sacred grounds. Slugs? Naruto groaned. I wish I just signed the snake contract. Do you wish to summon slugs? The slug asks, sounding sibilantly surprised. Very few venture here for that purpose. Mainly it is the toads, for the toads eat us. If you wish to sign, I suppose we can write a. No, 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 Naruto shouted. You're supposed to test me first. You know, make sure I'm worthy of your power or something. I do not know what to say, said the very confused slug. Katsuyu-sama serves Tsunade-chan, and as far as I know they had no contest of strength to determine their pact. Naruto was frustrated beyond all belief. He knew there was supposed to be some kind of ritual. That's how it worked. If you don't think of something soon, I'm going to walk home, he said darkly. If slugs could frown, the orange one would have frowned. Are you certain? Naruto's expression answered for him. The look of determination in his eyes could have lit a candle. Very well, the slug said reluctantly. If you can avoid defeat for 3 minutes, I will allow you to contract me. So to win, I have to not lose. What if I just win? The slug rippled restlessly. Do we have an accord? Yeah, deal. Now fight me. The slug reared back and spat a glob of something sticky at Naruto. He dodged easily, but flecks of the saliva caught on his clothes. The majority smashed into one of the nearby oaks, coating most of the trunk and eating through it entirely. Naruto yelled something profane as he dodged the falling tree, but the slug was already on his tail. You spit acid? Naruto shouted gleefully. That's fucking amazing. 15 of 180 seconds have elapsed, the slug commented. You must conserve your energy if you wish to survive. Conserve this. The blonde screamed, leaping backwards over the slug's massive body and plunging a kunai into its back. His arms sank into the soft body up to the elbow, and the slug didn't seem phased. It swiveled its head around, the eye stalks focused intently on Naruto. That tickles, it deadpanned. Naruto's eyes widened, just before another ball of acid nearly took his head off. He yanked on his arm with all his might, and he popped out of the orange flesh with a startled yelp. The slug turned and advanced inexorably, driving Naruto away from cover and into a decimated clearing. 2/3 of your time remain, it said. Naruto had the stamina to run for 2 more minutes, but the slug had more tricks up its metaphysical sleeve. Naruto ducked behind a lone remaining tree to get out of the line of fire, but the slug had preempted him. A white blob with orange patches already clung to the backside of the tree, firing its deadly payload at Naruto as he backpedaled frantically. He darted across the clearing, zigzagging erratically and dodging the acid as it rained down on him. The slug counted 2 minutes down and decided to increase the difficulty by splitting into hundreds of copies and vanishing into the earth. What the hell? Naruto shouted. The acid was now coming from all directions, forcing him to execute some complicated acrobatics to keep himself intact. The largest slug was humming a nameless tune, behaving more like a hunter with quarry in its sights than a garden pest. The slugs were crawling towards Naruto's feet, scores of smaller ones blotting out the ground while larger ones acted as artillery from behind. More and more emerged from the ground, advancing with quiet confidence while the area Naruto had to use shrank slowly. Suddenly, they all vanished, leaving only the original slug. Perhaps a relatively short test, but you have demonstrated your competence. I would be proud to accompany you on your missions. Slugs. Naruto breathed. Slugs are awesome. I am glad you agree, said the slug. If you have a contract, we can. You spit freakin' acid. And you can clone yourself. Like me. Only Kakashi-sensei can clone himself like me. As it turned out, slugs could write. It involved some extremely awkward maneuvering and unusual liquids, but eventually the slug had written up a contract in impeccable handwriting. Naruto was slightly annoyed that a slug had better handwriting than him, but this one was an elite slug. It was more like another sensei than a servant. Sign, please. With what? Naruto asks. I don't have a pen or nothing. The slug gave Naruto an unamused look, or so Naruto assumed. They didn't really have conventional facial features. Cut your thumb and use the blood. Naruto regarded his right thumb nervously, then bit it hard and smeared the blood liberally on his index finger. As neatly as possible, he wrote, Uzumaki Naruto, in red letters. The slug spat on the contract, and the acid resolved itself into a black burn shaped as a kanji. Senshi. When you have need of the slug's aid, simply spread your blood and summon us, said Senshi. Right. Listen, how do I-I-A-A-A-A-A-A-R-R-G-H? Naruto grabbed his elbow in astonishment as a black tattoo spider webbed across the unblemished skin. Senshi nodded apologetically, and the world went dark as pain lanced through his arm. The end. Thank you for watching guys.